Imagine this. You're walking in a column so long that if you stand at the tail, you can't even see where it begins. But this isn't just a line of soldiers, it's an entire city on the move. Smoke rising from field kitchens, the metallic clink of weapons being checked one last time, the sour smell of puska drifting in the morning air and under your feet, thousands of hobnailed sandals pounding the road in unison. This isn't a drill. This is the largest moving machine of the ancient world, a Roman legion on the march. The force that powered the entire history of the Roman Empire. But ask yourself, could you even survive? Waking at 3 a.m. when the world is still dark, hauling 60 pounds on your back, each step pressing like stone. And when night falls, absolute silence. No laughter, no singing, not a sound, only darkness. And the enemy listening somewhere out there. This isn't Marching 101. This is the science of survival and the art of logistics. How a 7.5 mile column, 10-12 km, operates like clockwork every single day without breaking. And it's not just Rome's story, it's also a lesson for you. In long-distance hiking, when a football team needs to hold its rhythm, or when an American city braces for a hurricane. So before we march with them, I want to hear from you. What would break you first, the 3 a.m. wake-up call, the crushing weight on your back, or the tense silence of a Roman night? To truly understand a Roman legion, you can't just see it as an army. It is three things at once: a machine, a beast, and a city. First, picture it as a machine. Training targets pushed to about 20 Roman miles in 5 hours. But in real campaigns, legions typically covered 12 to 18 miles a day, depending on terrain and loads. The Romans called this their operational tempo. Break that rhythm and everything falls apart. March too far and soldiers collapse, exposing the column. March too little and the campaign drags, making the army vulnerable. Rome's strength wasn't speed, it was a steady rhythm, ticking like a clock. Next, see it as a beast. It has eyes in the front, the vanguard scouting for danger. It has a shield at the back, the rear guard, keeping the body from being bitten by surprise. And it has two exposed flanks, always needing patrols. Vanguard, flanks, rear guard, they worked like survival instincts in a living body. Lose one, and the beast could fall. Finally, it is a city on the move. In just 4 hours from empty ground, they could raise a castrum, a fortified camp complete with gates, walls, streets, granaries, kitchens, even latrines. While their enemies slept under the stars, Roman soldiers slept behind ramparts, armed and supplied. That's how Rome kept advancing without relying on cities or allied fortresses. Still hard to picture the scale? Imagine this. A marching column stretching 7.5 miles, 10-12 kilometers, longer than 100 NFL football fields lined end to end. And inside that massive body, every step, every horn blast, every order was perfectly in rhythm. Think of it as a 24-hour map. Dawn with the gallop of scouts, morning with disciplined marching, afternoon raising a fortress, and night not as rest, but as another phase of operations. Across those 24 hours, the Roman legion didn't just move. It breathed, reacted, and survived like a giant organism, machine, beast, and city fused into one, the model that underpinned the entire history of the Roman Empire. The strength of a Roman legion didn't just come from discipline or courage. It started with the numbers, and these numbers are enough to make even a modern logistics officer break into a sweat. On paper, two imperial legions fielded roughly 10,000 and 11,000 heavy infantry, typically reinforced by 5,000 and 6,000 auxiliaries, Numidian cavalry, Syrian archers, Spanish slingers, German infantry. Together, they formed a wall of weapons stretching for miles. And that's just the front line. Behind them came 3,000 to 4,000 laborers, slaves and servants, the hands that cooked meals, repaired weapons, pitch tents, and handle the animals. Add thousands of pack animals, each capable of hauling roughly 220–280 pounds of gear, turning the Legion into a moving supply chain. At that point, you're looking less at an army and more at a moving caravan. That was the cost of moving. And it wasn't only the animals carrying loads. Every Roman soldier marched with 45 to 65 pounds on his back. A lorica segmentata or chainmail shirt, a scutum shield, a gladius sword, a pilum javelin, wooden stakes for camp defenses, a shovel, cooking gear, a water flask, 3 days of dry rations, and personal items. Sound familiar? That's almost identical to the ruck load of modern U.S. Marines or infantry soldiers, 35 to 60 pounds on long marches. The Romans were doing it more than 2,000 years ago. That's why Roman soldiers earned the nickname Muli Mariani, Marius's mules. It came from the reforms of Gaius Marius, who required soldiers to carry their own kit instead of relying on wagons. It wasn't just a technical tweak, it was a mindset shift. Every soldier wasn't just a fighter, but a self-contained logistics unit. So when you hear the dry numbers, 20,000 to 30,000 men, and animals hauling hundreds of tons of equipment, remember that every single step was a calculation between endurance and speed. And now I want to turn it over to you ruckers and hikers watching this channel. What's your comfortable daily mileage under load? Around 3:30 a.m., when the world was still in darkness, the Roman legion was already moving. The Romans called this the fourth watch of the night, the time when enemies were deepest in sleep. For the legion, it was the start of another day of survival. The first sound wasn't swords clashing against shields or officers barking orders. It was the muffled thunder of hooves, the speculatores, Rome's elite scouts. If you want a modern comparison, think of them as the early warning AI of the ancient world flesh and blood systems trained to detect threats before they happen. They rode out before dawn, scanning terrain, checking for ambushes, watching every unfamiliar village. If they failed, the miles-long column behind them could be slaughtered before anyone knew what hit them. Back at camp, a single blast of the cornu, the Roman brass horn, broke the silence. No shouting, no chaos, just one note, and the camp stirred like a single organism. Each contubernium, a squad of 8 men, went through the same drill they'd done hundreds of times. Strike the tent, pack up gear, check weapons. And above all, check the details. Were the sandal straps tight? Was the armor belt secure? Was the gladius snug in its scabbard? The Romans lived by a principle every U.S. soldier today would recognize. Fix it now or pay for it later. Because a loose strap could cripple you mid-march. A javelin not tied down could be lost before battle. One man's mistake could slow or even endanger the entire unit. This is where small discipline created massive strength. Nothing was trivial. Every detail mattered. So by the time the horizon was only just beginning to glow, the legion was ready to march. From the pounding hooves of scouts up front, to the horn blast echoing across camp, to the sandals buckled tight, everything was designed to transform a mass of tens of thousands into a single unified rhythm. At the very front, column where no one knows what lies ahead, where a single arrow or a hidden trap could decide an entire campaign, stood the vanguard. And this wasn't just a few scouts thrown together. It was a purpose-built hybrid spearhead designed for speed, flexibility, and lethality. Out front rode the light cavalry of Numidia and Thrace, tough horsemen, masters of rough terrain. Supporting them were archers from Crete and Syria, famed across the empire for long-range accuracy. And at the core, light infantry, stripped down, lightly burdened, ready to sprint forward, strike, or fall back in seconds. They were the thin but vital skin that protected the legion's body. The distance between the vanguard and the main column could stretch as far as 2 miles, especially in dense forests like the Pacific Northwest today. That buffer wasn't wasted space. It was the difference between order and disaster. It gave the vanguard time to spot danger, send signals, call for reinforcements, or retreat in good order. Without it, the main body would never have time to react. Picture a scenario. A horn sounds up front, but it's the wrong signal. The rumor spreads like wildfire through a dry forest. Soldiers in the middle think there's an ambush. Panic ripples backward. A few men break ranks and run, dragging whole units into chaos. This is the panic cascade, and it could tear apart a marching column miles long in just minutes. Rome trained to prevent exactly that. Orders from the command nucleus shot forward through mounted couriers. Units tightened their pace. Discipline held. Every soldier knew the rule: ignore rumors, follow the horn, obey direct orders. By discipline and by vanguard control, the chaos was smothered before it could spread. And that's the true value of the vanguard. They weren't just the first to fight. They were the buffer that bought time for the heavy corps behind them to prepare, to respond, and most importantly, to survive. Right behind the vanguard marched the quietest but most decisive men in the legion, the agrimensores, the military surveyors. They weren't fighters but masters of land and measurement. Armed with tools that looked simple like the groma or korobots, they carried the power to shape the fate of an entire campaign. Their job? To choose the site where over 20,000 men and animals would spend the night. Sounds simple, but one mistake could spell disaster. Their checklist never changed. Is there clean water nearby? Is the ground solid, well-drained? Is the position elevated for visibility and defense? Is there wood and stone nearby for ramparts and fortifications? And finally, is there enough open space to deploy into battle if needed? Choose wrong and the price was steep. A low field that seemed fine by day could turn into a swamp after one night of rain tents collapsing, weapons rusting, men falling sick. An overlooked hill could become the perfect ambush site for the enemy. A shallow river that seemed safe could fail to protect an entire flank. And this wasn't just Rome's problem. If you've ever set up a field camp in the backcountry or worked with a wildfire crew in the US, pick the wrong ground and you risk safety, strength, and even lives. That's why Rome valued the agrimensores as highly as generals. They understood a truth that sounds simple, but is deeply profound. Plan is a shelter you can sleep inside. A good plan wasn't just ink on parchment, it was the difference between rest and ruin. In the middle of the massive column, neither at the front nor at the rear, sat a strategic nerve center, the command nucleus. Here the legatus legionis, the commanding general, worked alongside his military tribunes and a small cell of administrative officers to coordinate the entire machine. The position was chosen carefully, isolated but still accessible, safe enough to protect the commander, close enough so that critical information could reach him within minutes. From this hub, orders pulsed outward like blood through veins. The cursors, mounted couriers, were the data buses of the Roman machine. They galloped from the commander to the vanguard, to the flanks, or back to the rear guard, carrying short-coded instructions. Nothing wasted, nothing ambiguous. The rule of command here was simple, but absolute. No noise, no hesitation. Because one wrong signal could trigger a domino effect across a column miles long. A single unit misunderstanding an order, a disrupted pace, and suddenly the enemy had an opening to destroy the legion. Now put yourself in the general's place. You've just been told the road ahead is washed out by flash floods. But if you reroute, you risk ambush. Which do you choose? A. Gamble on the flooded path slower but safer from ambush. B. Take the alternate route faster but exposed to enemy attack. Drop your choice in the comments, because this was the kind of silent decision Roman generals faced every single day, carrying the weight of tens of thousands of lives on their shoulders. At the core of the legion, the true heart of the machine, marched the main body. Over 13,000 legionaries organized into 10 cohorts, each broken down into centuries of about 80 men. This was the largest, heaviest, and most disciplined block of the march. Their arrangement was no accident. Veterans, battle-tested and steady, were placed at the front to set the rhythm. New recruits marched in the middle, shielded on all sides by experienced soldiers. And troublemakers? They were pushed to the rear where officers could keep the closest watch. This was how Rome turned human unpredictability into discipline. But the real genius was in pace control. The legion marched 12 to 18 miles a day. No more, no less. That number was sacred. Pushed too far, and soldiers collapsed, leaving the column vulnerable. Fall short, and the campaign slowed, exposing the army as a sitting target. The just right pace was the tightrope that kept Rome alive. And when someone collapsed, the rule was brutally clear. If they fell nearby and the terrain allowed, comrades helped them back up. But if not, they were left behind. Efficiency came before compassion. The legion could only survive by protecting its rhythm. One man, no matter how valuable, could not halt the machine. That was the harsh moral math Rome lived by. Sound familiar? It should. Modern armies follow the same logic. In U.S. Army convoy doctrine, there's a simple phrase: keep interval, keep rolling. If one vehicle stops, the whole convoy risks ambush, just like one fallen soldier could throw off the rhythm of an entire column. Rome's lesson is stark but enduring. Victory doesn't come from bursts of heroics. It comes from pace steady, relentless, day after day. Right behind the main body marched the part no Roman general could afford to ignore: the baggage train, or impedimenta. This was the supply chain of the legion, and paradoxically, it was both the beating heart and the Achilles heel. Inside the train, you'd find everything that kept an army alive far from home: grain, salt, and vinegar, tools, axes, picks, hammers, even dismantled catapults, scrolls of maps and orders, survival gear, tents, cloaks, medicines. Without these, Roman soldiers wouldn't last a week, much less conquer continents. Rules here were as strict as rules of engagement. No unloading carts without orders. No wagon abandoned under any circumstances. Any chaos in logistics was punished harshly, sometimes immediately, to make an example. The Romans also planned for failure. That's why they carried spare mules and oxen, along with blacksmiths and wagon repair crews marching with the column. A broken axle or a collapsed mule had to be fixed within minutes, or the entire army could grind to a halt. Because the baggage train was slow and vulnerable, it was placed in the safest position behind the main body, shielded by the rear guard and protected by flank patrols. This was defense in depth in action. Multiple layers of security to make sure no enemy could touch the supply heart without paying dearly. Sound familiar? It should. In FEMA deployments or National Guard operations, the equation is the same. Logistics fails equals mission fails. When the supply line breaks, you don't have an army, you have a starving mob. And Rome, 2,000 years ago, understood that better than anyone. At the very end of the column was the rear guard, and don't mistake this for a punishment detail. On the contrary, it was a specialized assignment, a kind of psychological special forces. The rear guard didn't have the glory of the vanguard or the flash of cavalry escorts. Their work was quiet, protecting the slow-moving baggage train, collecting stragglers, making sure the darkness behind the column never turned into a mortal threat. But that silence was the most dangerous part, because a single strike from behind even a small one could spark panic, spreading like wildfire. One shout in the dark, one horn misinterpreted, and miles of marching soldiers could unravel in chaos. History carved this lesson deep. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 CE, pronounced Teutoburg. 3 Roman legions under Publius Quinctilius Varus were wiped out when the rear and flanks collapsed in the German woods. No coordination, no rhythm, the column torn apart and devoured piece by piece. It was the empire's greatest disaster at its peak, an event that reshaped Roman military doctrine, and it forced Rome to rewrite its doctrine forever. After Teutoburg, the rearguard was no longer a placeholder. It became proactive, with its own flank patrols, engineers on hand, and reinforced elite troops. They didn't just defend, they anticipated threats, turning the vulnerable back of the column into a controlled safe zone. The message is clear: protect what feeds you. The rear guard wasn't glamorous, but they were the shield that kept the supply heart beating. And if that heart stopped, the legion ceased to be a machine. It became just a crowd waiting to be destroyed. If the vanguard is the eyes and the rear guard is the shield, then the flanks are the legion's permanent weak spots. Imagine a formation stretched out more than 6 miles, its sides exposed like bare ribs, vulnerable to every spear thrust. To protect them, Rome relied on flank guards' mobile units moving parallel to the column, but off the main road. They were like modern search and rescue teams in the Rockies, not sticking to the easy path but plunging into valleys, cutting through forests, climbing ridges, and sliding down ravines always appearing where no one expected. Their job wasn't glory. It was silent observation, spotting danger before it ever reached the main body. In hostile lands like Germania or Dacia, Rome hired local scouts. Simple principle: hire the map. If you want to survive, you need people who already know the terrain by heart. That lesson isn't just for ancient war. For a company or project team in the US today, it's the same principle of localization. Step into a new market and you need locals to guide you. But don't think of this role as taking a walk in the woods. A single mistake from the flank guard could open a mile-wide breach. Picture yourself as a flanker. The road is narrow, the forest thick, visibility just a few feet. You miss a warband lying in ambush on the ridge. In moments, they crash down, tearing into the column side. Signals travel too slowly, and the main force rips apart from the flank. All because of one lapse. That's why flank guards were always seasoned veterans, men trusted to act independently when no commander was nearby. Their checklist was non-negotiable. Keep distance from the main line, check every side path, climb to high ground whenever possible, and never leave a blind spot unmonitored. Rome understood, when the giant beast moves, the enemy will always hunt the ribs. And if the flanks collapse, no matter how strong the heart, the body won't survive. By sunset, the giant column halted, and this wasn't the time to rest. It was the time to transform an empty field into a fortified city in under 4 hours. The SOP, standard operating procedure, never changed. First, dig the ditch about 6 feet deep and 10 feet wide, running the perimeter. The soil was piled inside to form a rampart, topped with wooden stakes each soldier carried throughout the day. Suits, also called valley, standard issue, as essential as a sword or shield. Next came the 4 gates. Porta Praetoria at the front, Porta Decumana at the rear, Porta Principalis Sinistra, and Porta Principalis Dextra on the sides. Even before the walls were finished, guards were already posted at these gates. Inside, a grid of perpendicular streets took shape. These weren't just walkways, they were a military road system, ensuring orders and units could move instantly if needed. At the center stood the Praetorium, the commander's tent. Here, a portable altar was raised, sacrifices offered, omens read, and decisions made. Around it, storehouses, field kitchens, and yes, even latrines had assigned locations. The Romans knew health was combat strength. Why did this matter so much? Simple. Sleeping behind walls meant you avoided a night raid. It meant if an attack came, escape routes were already mapped. It meant an exhausted army could truly rest, not doze in fear. Compare this to wildfire base camps in America's national forest today. When firefighters set up in the woods, every detail from sanitation and meal zones to traffic routes directly shapes their ability to fight fire. Rome had mastered this principle 2,000 years ago. In 4 hours, a barren field became a mobile fortress. And it wasn't optional, it was doctrine. Defense first, rest later. When darkness fell, many ancient armies treated it as a time for rest, drinking, or at least lowering their guard. For Rome, night wasn't for sleep, it was another operational phase. First came dinner, if you can call it that. Not a feast, just fuel. Soldiers ate pulse, a thick porridge of ground wheat, and drank pasca, a sour mix of vinegar, salt, and water. Harsh? Sure, but compare it to an MRE for US soldiers or trail food for long-distance hikers. It wasn't about taste. It was about portability, endurance, and survival. But the defining trait of a Roman night wasn't food, it was silence. No laughing, no singing, no instruments. Even footsteps were muted. Why? Because the enemy might be listening. But deeper than that, silence turned the camp into one unified body, no one breaking rhythm, no one forgetting they were on campaign. Guard rotations were as precise as clockwork. Each sentry received the tessera, the daily password, and had to present it at checkpoints. Watches rotated every 3 hours, staggered to avoid exhaustion. And the penalty for falling asleep? Brutal to modern ears, fustuarium beaten to death by the soldier's own squad with cudgels, sometimes with stones. Harsh, yes, but in ancient logic, one man's mistake could kill 20,000 others. Meanwhile, every soldier lived in a constant state of readiness. When the horn sounded, there were no questions. Everyone knew where to run, which gate to defend, and what formation to take. This was muscle memory drilled so deep it became instinct, just like modern soldiers practicing battle drills until they're automatic. In the end, Rome weaponized silence itself. In the dark, in the forest, on open plains, silence kept the legion not just alive, but ready to strike first. Rome wasn't the one surprised. Rome was the one doing the surprising. After 24 hours on the march, the truth becomes clear. This wasn't just an army moving. It was flawless choreography, survival, strategy, and total domination of both time and space. What seemed like 3 separate identities now fused into one. Machine, a precise tempo of 12 to 18 miles a day, never faster, never slower in operational tempo every modern army still chases. Beast, vanguard, flanks, rear guard reflexes of survival that made the legion an animal too dangerous to ambush. City, a castrum raised in 4 hours, complete with gates, streets, warehouses, kitchens, and latrines, and infrastructure on the move. And the magic was in the alignment. From the micro, the Titan sandal strap, the checked hobnail shoe, up to the macro, the horn signals, the maps, the couriers galloping miles along the column. Everything clicked like gears inside a single machine. That's why Rome didn't just win battles. It won campaigns. A marching day wasn't downtime between fights. It was victory in itself. Because if you maintain that rhythm, that discipline, that synchronization, your enemy was already beaten long before they even saw your face. So what does this entire 24-hour march of a Roman legion really say to us in the 21st century? This isn't just ancient history, these are operating principles that still matter. In sports, especially the NFL, the winning team isn't the one with a single 70-yard highlight run. Games are won by managing tempo and field position. Pace matters more than speed. Rome lived by that logic for centuries. 12 to 18 miles a day, never faster, never slower. In business and tech, the reflection is obvious. Sprint cadence in software is tempo. On-call rotations? That's the night watch. And incident response? That's your vanguard, flanks, and rear operating in the digital space, the ones who take the first hit, the ones covering the sides, and the ones making sure the infrastructure doesn't collapse behind you. In emergencies, hurricane evacuations, wildfire deployments, the principle becomes even sharper. Logistics, first mindset. You can have volunteers, you can have rescue trucks, but without supply chains and properly built base camps, the whole mission collapses in the first hours. Rome proved it long before FEMA ever existed. Logistics is survival. And what about you? If you had to live inside a legion for one day, where would you fit? The scout riding out ahead, taking the risks so the rest have time to react. The surveyor turning empty ground into a city where thousands can sleep safely. The pace setter keeping rhythm steady so the whole unit doesn't burn out or lag behind. Or the rear shield, the silent protector, not flashy, but the one holding everything together. Rome showed us this truth, front or back, each role was survival. And that's the lesson worth carrying forward. Now it's your turn. If you only had 24 hours in a Roman legion, where would you serve and why? Would you ride point with the vanguard, taking risks to buy time? Would you be a surveyor, the one who turns raw earth into a fortress city? Would you be the pace setter, keeping thousands in step, mile after mile? Or would you stand guard at the rear, the quiet shield that keeps collapse at bay? And let me ask you this. Have you ever had a Teutoburg moment in your own life? A time when your team or project collapsed, not because of effort, but because of lack of coordination? How did you overcome it and fix it? Share in the comments. Your story might be the lesson someone else needs. One day with the Roman legion leaves us with a timeless truth. Discipline is freedom. When every detail from the strap on a sandal to the layout of a camp is in its right place, you can sleep soundly even when chaos waits outside the walls. If you found this video engaging and valuable, hit like to support the channel, drop a comment to share your perspective, and click subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. And remember, every like, every comment, every new subscriber is the fuel that keeps this channel moving so I can bring you more journeys into the past, more lessons for today, and more history that still matters.